Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the June 5th meeting, the regularly scheduled meeting of the Apex Town Council. This time, I'd like to ask you to join me for the invocation. God, we thank you for the opportunity to be here to serve the people of Apex. We pray that you give us wisdom. We pray that you give us compassion. We pray that we look out for our fellow man and woman. We thank you for those who have died for our freedom, and those who are continuing to fight, and those who have sacrificed and lost. We pray your comfort and guidance for all of them. We lift all these prayers and thoughts in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Just a quick couple of notes. Most of you, I think, have been here before, so I'll be brief, but if you intend to sign up for a public hearing, that is, if you intend to speak during either the public forum or the public hearing tonight, there are some sign-up sheets on that ledge. Please make sure you pick the correct one and put your name there. The other is there is a yellow handout. It looks like this out in the hall on the pedestal. And if you need to get one to familiarize yourself with the guidelines, please do so. Likewise, the agenda for tonight is also on that podium. At this time, I'd like to recognize David Hughes. He's going to make our presentation number 1 tonight. Mr. Hughes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have 2 new key employees we wanted to introduce to you all tonight. First is Eric Newman. Take a bow. Eric started about 5 weeks ago. He is native of New York. He has a professional engineer's license in New York and North Carolina. He has a bachelor's science degree in electrical engineering from Manhattan College. He has an MPA from Marist. He has a background in consulting, quite a wide background, consulting, distribution. He spent the last several years with the good old folks at Duke. He has a background with Black & Veatch and AB&B, so he has got a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we are really looking forward to having him working with us. That is Eric Newman. Dennis Brown, he is our construction project manager. He is a Siler City native, born and bred. He's NC State graduate, civil engineering degree, PE as well, and has experience in the construction industry itself on the bad end of the hammer. Project manager and superintendent. He's got quite a bit of experience in project management as construction administrator for architect and he's project manager. He just left Wake Tech as a project manager for the last 6 years or so, I think. So he's got another wealth of experience, and with all our big projects coming up, he's going to come in real handy. So we're very pleased to have them both.
Thank you very much. Welcome all. At this time, I'd like to recognize Jonathan Whitehurst for presentation number 2. This is in regards to the Advanced Apex, and doing the introduction, it looks like Shannon Cox.
Actually, just making sure we have his presentation up here for him, but yeah, this is one of our key consultants for Advanced Apex. Okay, here we go.
Thanks, Jen. So first, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I certainly appreciate that, and the other thing that I appreciate is the spirit of partnership that we have with Shannon and Diane and other folks in the planning and engineering staff. That's not something that we take for granted, and it's certainly not something that happens in all communities, so we appreciate that. So I'm here to speak just for a few minutes. This is the second of 4 updates that we're going to provide to you all throughout the process that we're going through to develop the land use and transportation plan that we're referring to as Advanced Apex. And it's really kind of wise on the part of the town to do this land use and transportation together, because there certainly is a link between the two, and it's that link between land use and transportation that I'm going to focus on a little bit today, specifically to kind of introduce you to how we're approaching the land use component of this process and tying that to complete streets, how it's represented in the cross sections and other things. The beginning of the presentation might be a little bit of a repeat, but just how the plan overall is going to be used. We're creating a framework that staff and you all as elected officials can use to make transportation and land use decisions. It's an important process in terms of helping you secure the funding that you need and providing the vision, the umbrella document that you need to start to shape policy and program decisions. The process really is community-driven. I'll show you some of that here in a minute. Specifically working with the community to establish a vision and identify needs. We got great support and great participation from the community in that respect. And then as time goes on, as the process matures, we're going to work with the community to identify ways to guide growth, to identify those specific projects, and most importantly, we're going to work with staff and the community to create a process by which we can prioritize some of those projects and create an action plan so that there's actually a blueprint for implementation. The process began about a year ago. We'll talk a little bit at the end about some of the upcoming milestones and events. But over the last several months, we've been working through developing some preliminary recommendations both on the land use and transportation side, and we're starting to refine those, make sure that they're speaking to one another, and then we'll be digging into the prioritization process here very shortly. So engagement, one of the ways that kind of the partnership between us as consultants and staff really manifests it is how engaged we can get with the community. We were very pleased with the engagement, with the participation that we got. 1,200 individual online responses. That's a big number, but I think we're more proud of the individual data points that translated to. So we're talking of thousands of individual data points, hundreds and hundreds of comments that we're able to pour through and really start to use to guide this plan to make sure, again, that it's community driven. It wasn't just online responses. There were a lot of face-to-face meetings both with the public and a variety of focus groups. I think with the engagement, what we started to find is that it was very clear that the public is perceptive to the challenges that are facing both land use and transportation, and a lot of times those challenges, the lines between those are blurry, and that's why, again, it was wise to do these plans concurrently. We heard some specific things about this is where transportation problems are, and then we heard bigger issues like there is this disconnect between land use and transportation. The focus groups, we were able to tailor the conversation there to those specific groups, and again, this is all information that we've been able to use as we start to develop the recommendations, and those recommendations will be reported back to the public very soon. So let's talk real quick about the land use map. The reason that this is a part of the process is there's just been numerous amendments, I'm sure you all are aware of that, over the last several years to the existing land use plan. So we wanted to kind of bring that up to speed. The map itself is going to be updated. We're also going to look at some changes to the land use descriptions. For instance, the current land use map shows parks and golf courses separately, and we'll kind of blend those into a park, public, and private. So just to try to simplify the land use plan and make it a little bit more predictable for staff and for those that use it on a regular basis. The changes are going to be based on kind of community input as well as some good partnership with staff. The process, it was a 4-step process. The land use screening led us to kind of the selection of the focus areas that I'll tell you about in just a minute. And where we are in the process right now is in that third bullet, the land use alternatives. So we're actually working with staff to develop those alternatives, and we're going to present those at our steering committee for discussion at our meeting next week. And ultimately that will lead to the land use map revisions. The focus areas themselves, you know, there's a lot of parts of the town that honestly just don't need the level of detail, the level of analysis that is necessary in other parts. So that land use screening, looking at forces and trends, development status, environmental features, taking a look at the previous plan. We used all of that as well as input from the public to identify these areas that we're calling focus areas. So the focus areas are there. They're the areas that have been identified as the most potential to change over time. So these are the areas that we're looking at in a little bit more detail, and I know that staff is going to look at some other places as well. And the areas you know, span mostly south of 64, but kind of in those areas that you're probably seeing the most growth pressures. So for each of those areas, we're developing multiple alternatives. Either 2 or 3 alternatives will be developed for each of those areas. One of those alternatives will always be the current 2030 land use plan. So that's kind of what we're comparing these alternative futures against. How is it different than what we're currently planned to do? And we want to make sure that whatever those alternatives are, that they reflect the community engagement that we've been able to collect. So we're looking at things like preserving rural character, finding ways to make places more walkable and livable where it makes sense, exploring how rural preservation is going to increase the need for density in other areas, and then the last point there is investing in key corridors. So land use is going to kind of permeate through the process in a lot of different ways. One of the more direct ways is the complete streets. With the complete streets is just going to be one of several elements to kind of supplement what you would think of as a traditional transportation plan in terms of these are the roadway recommendations, these are the recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian, this is the future for transit and Apex. But complete streets is really kind of where the land use and transportation are going to overlap the most. And really it's taken the land use context, you know, is the place urban, is it rural, kind of taking an understanding of transportation considerations and then letting that kind of dictate what the street design of that particular street type will be. And that's an important process overall because that's how decisions are going to be made, how street design priorities are going to be dictated both to town staff and then to the development community as well. The key, though, is to offer predictability over time to those folks that are going to be using this plan on a day-to-day basis. So real quick, complete streets, safe, comfortable, accessible travel for all folks. It's really a focus on moving people regardless of age or ability. But again, it's done so in a way that responds to the unique land use context that that particular corridor is traveling through. And when we took all the public feedback that we received, it was very clear that the public is looking for ways for the town to be proactive through the year 2040, 2045 and beyond to make sure that this land use and transportation connection is very deliberate. So how this will manifest itself in the plan, there'll be a set of street cross-section sheets, if you will, and this is the type of information that will be conveyed in the plan. We'll have street types. We'll talk about the transportation characteristics in terms of how much traffic is what is the posted speed limit, what are the spacing considerations, what is the access on those particular streets. The typical cross-section is important. It's going to show both what is the need for right-of-way as well as kind of the dimensions of the different street elements itself. And then when we kind of dig down a little bit deeper, the street design elements are going to, again, be adjusted based on context. So the street design in a rural area will naturally be different than in the central business area. And then we're also going to make sure that we respect the need for understanding that street design is going to vary if it's in a standard environment or a constrained environment. So when we get into that constrained environment and we're having to kind of navigate, the competition for space, this particular part of the plan is going to allow you to do that. And then this is also going to make sure that we reference the mode-specific plans that are out there, whether they're existing like the ongoing bicycle plan or any kind of future transit study. We'll make sure that there's a way for this to be updated over time. So where do we go from here? There's a transit focus group work session that happened yesterday. So again, we're continuing to get good information. We're going to continue to refine the recommendations and really start to take a detailed look at project prioritization. We actually have 2 steering committee meetings that are coming up, and we've kind of split those up to make sure that we can be a little bit more deliberate in terms of the type of information that we're going to cover with the steering committee. And then the public workshop on August 2nd is going to be a very important time for this plan, and that's when we're going to kind of unveil the recommendations and start to collect feedback on those as well as the priorities. With that, I welcome any questions that you might have at this moment.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Any questions? Well, this is a big project, and it's hard to believe we're this far along, Shannon, and appreciate everything your firm's done for us. Looking forward to having an update to the 2030 plan, which is quickly becoming out of date. So,
for those focus groups or focus areas, has there been outreach to the current residents and the ones that kind of live nearby, more than just a general survey of people throughout the town?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't reached out specific to folks. I mean, there'll be that opportunity to do that. I think one thing that we were able to do through the engagement process is to geolocate specific comments that we're receiving, right? So with that database, we're able to look and say, okay, this comment is applying to this specific area. In places like in the Friendship area, that's really important. In the western part of the study area, it's been interesting to kind of see not just what the comments are, but specifically where they're being applied to.
I have a question related to how to continue to keep people engaged in this process. So once the steering committee stops meeting, are there things that you recommend for us to do to continue to have that sustained voice of people?
Yeah, well, a lot of thought and consideration went into kind of what is the group, what is the steering committee, and we've been really kind of blessed with that group, and while we talk to them as if their participation in the plan itself is important, we want them to be champions for the plan, and so that's why a lot of thought goes into selecting the individuals for that. The other thing that we want to do is to kind of simplify the process, to make it predictable, so that it's easier for staff to use it and allow them to make sure that it's a plan that they can have open and have kind of the conversations that they need to have with the people to make sure that the vision and the recommendations are carried forward.
Thank you.
And the steering committee is going to continue to meet throughout this 18-month process. So those are just the upcoming meetings.
Thank you.
all right, thank you, Mr. Whitehurst.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. That concludes the presentation, so this time we move to consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered to be non-controversial, and we typically enact them with a single motion. If any council member wishes to pull an item for discussion later, they certainly can do so. And now would be the time, or if there is a motion to approve the consent, now would be the time for that as well.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, would you include the
Yes.
additional consent item?
Thank you very much. Just as a clarity, we have an add-on consent agenda item, so it's not a modification to an existing one. That was provided to you by the town manager. It's consent number add-on on the piece of paper in front of you. Just want to make sure all council members see that. The request from the town manager is we include that one in our motion today. Is that all right,
included
Mr. Moyer?
in the motion, yeah.
All right. All right, thank you very much. With that, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent with the add-on. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes. The consent agenda with the add-on has passed. We now move to the setting of the regular meeting agenda. At this time, I'll ask council if there are any agenda items we'd like to modify.
Yes, I'd like to add under old business, our previous, agenda item, new business 2 from our last meeting.
All right, so that would be new business number 2 from the May 15th meeting, which we discussed a resolution for surplus property in the upset bid process. If there's no objection from the council, we'll include that in our consideration for the agenda tonight. All right, thank you, Councilwoman. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the one modification for old business number 1, we'll call it.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with that addition.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All right, all in favor of the agenda as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that is our agenda set. We now move to public forum. This is a time where our public gets an opportunity to speak to their council members. As you know, we have opportunity at each meeting for someone from the citizenry to come speak to the council members. The town clerk is now bringing the sign-up sheets. Look at that. I hope y'all got your lunch or supper. No, I'm just kidding. It's empty. So we have the public forum sheet. There was no one signed up. So we will open and subsequently close the public forum tonight. And that moves us straight into public hearings. Public hearing number 1 is the question of annexation for the point at Lake Castleberry property, approximately 37 acres. And Diane Ken, our planning director, is presenting unless she has a substitute. Are you able to speak into the microphone?
Much better than yesterday.
Very nice to hear.
All right, just to orient you to the site, this is Green Level West Road here, and this is Wimberley Road here. This is actually the American Tobacco Trail that goes up through the middle of this property. This project was previously approved as a subdivision, and they do need to be annexed in order to get their construction plans approved so that they can get public water and sewer. And they are annexing the property on this side, which will be entirely resource conservation area. Staff does recommend approval.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Diane before we begin the public hearing? All right. We now open the public hearing, and no one has signed up, so I will close the public hearing, refer the matter back to council for a possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion to approve? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. We now move to public hearing number 2. Public hearing number 2 is annexation as well. This is approximately 5 acres for a piece of property known as Gray's Landing, and Diane is presenting as well.
All right, again, to orient you to the site, this is Apex Barbecue Road, this is Evans Road, and this is the town's nature park here. This was previously approved as a subdivision, and they also need to be annexed in order to get their construction plans approved so they can get public water and sewer. Town staff does recommend approval.
All right, thank you. Questions for Diane? All right, at this time I'll open the public hearing, and seeing that no one signed up, looks like it's going to be one of those kind of nights, we'll close the public hearing, refer the matter back to council for a possible motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
All right, that passes 4-1. We now move to public hearing number 3. Public hearing number 3 is a presentation by Vance Holloman, our Finance Director, and Marty Stone, the Water Resources Director, to discuss the water and sewer system development fee analysis that has been performed.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. House Bill 436 established procedures for the calculation and adoption of water and sewer system development fees. The requirements that were put in place must be met in order for those fees to be charged after July 1, 2008. In addition to the public hearing, they also required that the analysis be posted to our website for a period of 45 days, and also posted in such a way that someone could comment directly back to us. We did, in fact, do that. That 45-day period ended June 3. We received no comments regarding the plan. In your agenda items, you have House Bill 436, copy of the legislation. You have the fee report prepared by Ralph Tellis, Financial Consultants. You also have a resolution to consider after the public hearing. In addition, I prepared a presentation intended to summarize the other materials. I'll be happy to go over that if you choose this evening, whatever you prefer.
All right, thank you, Vance. Questions before we go to the public hearing? All right, not seeing any questions from the council, I'll open the public hearing, and we have no one signed up, so I will close the public hearing and refer the matter back to council for a possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on the motion?
We have no choice.
All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. That concludes public hearing, folks. We now move to old business number 1, which was new business number 2 at the May 15th meeting, and I'd like to recognize Councilwoman Killingsworth with the floor.
So, upon reviewing and meeting with a member of the town, it doesn't seem like there are any other things that we can put in place there that would not contribute to increasing traffic to that area or increasing parking difficulties to the area besides a home sitting there. So a home is going to bring in 1 to 2 cars to that area, whereas if we put in a park in that area, or even a mini park, so to speak, we're going to be looking at increasing traffic and having difficulty with parking in that area. So basically, I would like to reconsider this item of business so that we can possibly put up the surplus land for a bid.
All right. And as I understand, and I don't mean to get ahead, but as I understand, there may have been some discussion from at least 1 or 2 council members about possible restrictions on the use, or do you want to reconsider the resolution as was presented and discussed May 15th?
So one of the things that we discussed a little bit was possibly putting a restriction of the height of the house, possibly 1-story or 1.5-story restriction on that particular piece of land, because it's wherever it's located, as well as the odd piece of property that it is.
So I guess do we need to, Ms. Killingsworth needs to do a motion to reconsider, and then if we do have restrictions, then I guess I would like to make a motion that we go into closed session to get advice from the attorney. Those are 2 things I think that should happen. Is that right?
Perhaps if we want to consider the resolution as written, then we need a motion to reconsider the vote, and basically that rolls back the vote and we re-vote on the existing resolution. If the desire from the council is to make amendments to the resolution, then we don't need a motion to reconsider, but we do need to give direction to the town staff. And if we feel like we need direction from the town attorney, although I think earlier, did you not mention that we could probably do it in open session, or is that not true?
With what I spoke with Ms. Killingsworth about earlier today, I'm happy to give that advice in open session. If there's some additional follow-up questions, then a closed session might be better.
Okay. Is it satisfactory?
Whatever
okay.
you
Okay.
will of the council.
All right. All right. So now my understanding from what you just said is that we'd like to discuss height restriction possibilities.
Possibly.
And part of that may be related to character, especially considering the adjacent property, which is a single-story home.
So my question to staff, the small town character overlay, is there height restrictions anyway in that area?
It's 36 feet.
Okay, so, and maybe if I could follow up for you, is 36 feet usually going to restrict to a 1 or 1.5 story height house, or could that be a 2-story house, a proper 2-story house?
It could be a 2-story house. The roof pitch wouldn't be that steep. We're seeing most of the newer houses, if they're large houses, are more at 40 feet, but given the size of the lot, it could be 2 stories. It would be a modest home.
Okay. So I guess, Ms. Killingsworth, the question, I guess, would be, is 36 feet seem reasonable to you, or do you think that property requires something different?
I'm thinking on that particular property, a 2-story house would be out of place. That's my opinion on it.
Okay. All right. And from the attorney standpoint, are we're able to make a restriction on the property that has been declared surplus
So,
prior to a sale? I'm sorry.
There's 2 different ways that you could do this. You could do this as part of a deed restriction, meaning that as the current owner of the property, when you deed that property out, then you put that restriction of height in the deed. Typically, when you do that, so what happens if that condition has been violated is, depending on how the deed restriction is drafted, it would either automatically revert back to the town, the property could be automatically revert back to the town, or it could be subject to a condition where the town would have to go in and assert their authority to take it back. So it's an automatic provision versus a have to take action provision. The other method that you could do is, as the current owner of the property, you could come in and request a rezoning of the property to change the height limitation just for that particular property, and that would be fine as well. The difference in those 2 alternatives is, as a town, on a typical day-to-day basis, we're familiar with and used to zoning code enforcement. It's one of our duties that we perform here at the town on a regular basis. So from a zoning standpoint, that's an easier, cleaner method to go. And then thinking about in a deed restriction, it's a little more difficult to, from an enforcement mechanism, in that it's not something the town's typical standard course of day-to-day business. It's not something that would likely come up if somebody came in to get a building code to add an addition to an already existing 1-story house, say 20 years from now. That's not something a building code would typically pick up, a deed restriction that would prevent that. So you could end up in a situation years down the road where a subsequent owner decides to add on, not thinking about their deed restriction, and then the town council is in a position of having to assert its authority with regard to the property. So that's kind of the...
And a construction permit would probably not necessarily be part of that process? I mean, as far as being able to catch that?
It typically, our building code, our permitting section is not going to check deed restrictions when they're issuing permits. They will check zoning, is my understanding, correct? I mean, if it's clear.
It's easier when it's in a neighborhood, but yes, they are supposed to check the zoning.
Okay. If I'm hearing,
zoning option, route, of course, will take a little bit longer before you would actually be able to put the property on the market for sale.
It sounds to me like if we want to have a little bit better adherence and perhaps oversight, maybe the rezoning request, even though it might take a little longer to do, might be the better longer-term option. Does that? I guess I'm looking at you since this is sort of your topic here.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does sound reasonable to me.
So let me, if you don't mind, let me just take the temperature of council. Do you feel like we want to continue down this path and find out from, the next thing I would do is ask Diane, for example, what height would be reasonable to restrict to 1 and 1.5 stories.
Can I ask a follow-up about the zoning?
Okay, can you hold that for 1 second? I just want to see, are we barking up a dead tree, or do we want to keep going as a group? I'm just trying to get the temperature. Does anybody object to keep continuing?
No, I think it's a good idea to go that route.
I don't object.
Okay, all right, thanks. Sorry, go ahead now,
so
please.
because hear all about this, spot zoning sometimes about council shouldn't do this and it's legal to do it. Is it, if we're the owners, can we be, we're spot zoning ourselves theoretically if we do like this, and is that fine?
So, spot zoning is not necessarily illegal. It's subject to stricter scrutiny. Here, it would fall into a category of a relatively small sized lot, and, but the change would be so minor from the rest of the neighborhood, it wouldn't be a different use. We wouldn't be saying that, okay, in the middle of this residential subdivision, you can stick a gas station. It's not something, I assume that everything else would be consistent with the surrounding zoning, but the restriction of the height would be the only difference.
Okay.
It's more restrictive, so that puts us in a safe zone too, doesn't it?
It can.
Yeah, okay.
That was a good question,
Not necessarily in
though.
all cases, but, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to ask Diane, as the planning director, is there a measure in feet that you think would translate? Because I believe feet from ground level is a little bit easier to figure out from the outside than how many stories something is. Because the size of, for example, an attic, you might be able to fit a one or a half or a full floor. Do you have a height that you think would be recommended for something like this?
I can't answer that tonight because it really depends on the pitch of the roof.
Okay. What if we direct staff to research this, and with the understanding that the intention is that 1.5 stories would be considered acceptable because the roof pitch would typically look like a 1-story house, but that a 2-story house would be too tall. And stop me if I'm off track, but I think if we direct staff tonight to go investigate that and then modify the resolution and come back to council with that, as well as the rezoning request, and to go through whatever proper channels need to go through for that. Does that sound reasonable to council?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
The new business item 2 weeks ago was about going through the surplus upset bid process.
Right.
So do we do that and then rezone it, or what's our order of progression?
My take on this is that the upset bid process can be on hold. We have a standing offer, and until that offer is revoked or has some expiration date, which I don't know, but I would say that's still there. So I think it can just go on hold while we go through this process. Certainly the bidder could withdraw a bid if they want, or modify their bid in the meantime based on this change, and I think that would be fair. If we're making a change that may cause them to reconsider or rethink, it gives them time to either withdraw or modify their bid. That's my take, and am I off on the process here? Okay.
Is that right? Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. So the 36 feet, is that a restriction, like in that area of town? That whole area?
Per the overlay district, yes, it's 36 feet.
Okay. I think, there's a house that's fairly new that was built like 2 streets over the one on the corner, that's seems really tall. It's really fancy looking house. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what street that is.
It's on Chatham Street, and it was built prior to the small town character overlay district.
Was it? Okay.
All right. So I think what would be in order at this time would be a motion to direct staff to investigate the height guidance for 1.5 stories and to begin the rezone process accordingly to add that or modify that condition for the land.
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion?
I do, yeah. So
Okay.
I guess my concern on the height restriction is that area possibly could be an area where people come in, buy the lot, because those are fairly sizable lots, bulldoze the house and reconstruct a brand new house, and we're going to restrict them.
We're only talking about this one surplus.
We're just talking about
lot.
this one property, right?
No,
Because that The triangle piece?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very small lot.
Right, and I think,
Yeah.
right, the logic, the thinking is, it's such a small lot that anything over 1.5 stories is gonna look a bit out of character. It'll look like a good strong gust of wind will top it all, even though I know it won't. But we could check with our construction project manager for verification, put him on the job quick. But I think just from a scale perspective on that lot, I think that's the logic behind this restriction, specifically for this lot.
Okay.
Right.
just
I
this
understand
one.
that.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
I think that's a fair question.
I'm sorry, one of the beauties of going to the zoning is that they can always rezone this in the future.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's not a deed restriction that carries on
Right.
forever.
good point.
Okay,
point.
so, and that's the right way to go.
The new owner could do that.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes, and, let me just check with staff. Diane, are you okay? You understand what we're asking? And,
Yes, it'll be a
Okay.
town-initiated rezoning. We've done them
okay,
before.
great. All right, sounds good. Thank you very much. Appreciate you bringing that up. At this time, we look at unfinished business. There is none. We now move to new business, and this is a possible motion for adopting the 2018-19 annual budget ordinance and the new fee schedule. Presenting tonight is Sean Purvis, the Assistant Town Manager.
All right, Mayor Olive, members of City, or Town Council. So this evening, we come back to you to formally adopt the budget. We've been through public hearings, we've been through workshops, and now we're into June and need to have a budget ready by July 1st. We've been through several iterations. You've had multiple memos and revisions to the budget. This is what we hope is the final version. You can see in front of you a brief slide, just a quick outline. It's $132.3 million total. You can see the breakdown for each of the three major funds as well as the minor funds there. Tax rate and the revisions to public hearing does not include anything to the tax rate. It's still 41.5 cents, 1.5 being toward the bond. The main revisions that happened since the public hearing, because that did reduce the general fund budget. You can see there's a general fund budget reduction by about almost 1.9 million. That's primarily due to the Wake County assumption of EMS services. And then there was also an increase in the fund balance from general fund with $77,400 to help toward transportation with the elimination of transportation fees. There was more of that in transportation fees, but we moved some other projects around to try and accommodate for that. That's the main changes. Really, that's the only two primary changes. No changes in the electric fund, no changes in the water and sewer fund, just reduction in the general fund. With that, as far as new business item 1, I stand by to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Sean. Any questions for Sean?
The tax rate is
41.5 cents, sir. Yes, sir.
which went up from what, 38 was it?
Yes, sir. From the original, as we stand now, it's 38 cents.
38.
And then it was 1.5 for the bond, and then council asked for 2 more cents. Mainly, it was most of it was for transportation and public safety projects and programs.
All right, is there, another question?
So, I wanted your thoughts on when you're doing the budget. If the council decides that they want to put a certain percentage toward needs that are ongoing, like transit, affordable housing, public art, these kind of things, does that? I know it kind of hinders flexibility, but is it also helpful for the budget process, like maybe for next year, to have those kind of things in place? And which time of the budget process would those be appropriate to try to?
Let us know July 2nd.
Okay.
No, as far as anything the council wants to do in terms of designating whether it be a certain dollar amount or whether it be a certain percentage is certainly fine. In terms of flexibility, the more time we have to work with it, the better. So if there's something council wants to do, we really start in earnest with this in September when we start talking about our capital projects. That's when we'll talk to departments about going out, trying to start getting numbers, getting projects, getting their ideas together, because in October we want those submitted
so that we're reviewing those through the latter part of the calendar year, so that, you know, by December, we're having our first really public input, public hearing, and then we're going into January workshops and everything else. So the earlier we know, the better. Definitely by January, we need to be talking about what you have.
If I can just throw in, Mr. Purvis, Mr. Gant, you know, the best time for that probably is at your annual budget retreat that we try to have typically in January. So that, you know, Sean and his team aren't really working on the detail of the budget at that point. I mean, the capital improvement plan absolutely it starts in the fall. But if council can give us guidance at that time at your annual retreat, kind of the way you do with the goals that you have and some of your priorities that feed into the preparation that Sean and his team are doing. So that would be the ideal time. So if council at your retreat says, hey, when you present your budget to us, give us options for additional tax revenue like we did this year. So if you say, tell us how it would work if we set aside a penny of the tax rate for, or a percentage for this program, then that will help Sean and his folks present some options to you.
Right, because we'll start doing estimates for the next year, because then departments, you know, they're submitting requests in March, and then we'll start getting revenue projections, that sort of thing, as we move through the winter into the spring. So.
Okay. All right, great. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval of the budget and the fee schedule. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Purvis, did I read that 1 cent, I think we talked about this, 1 cent tax increase equals $620,000?
$698,000, almost $700,000.
Almost 700, so 2 cents would be 1.4
4 million, roughly, yes, sir.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed being part of this process for the first time. It's been really eye-opening how much things cost, and making sure that we're spending taxpayer money effectively and appropriately. And I appreciate the guidance you and the town manager are giving so far.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It makes it a lot easier when we have direction from you. So.
I appreciate you guys' effort. I appreciate the attention to spending more money on transportation. I have not supported this tax increase, the 2 cents on top of the 1.5% or 1.5 cent Parks and Rec bond. I'd much rather see us pull the 1.4 million from our reserves that are very healthy to fund some of these transportation projects and things around town. So I appreciate all your effort, but I'm not going to support this budget.
Understood.
Well, I think the raise that we did is primarily for safety and transportation, and I think most of the stuff I get that is a little negative is that we need better transportation avenues. So I think we're responding to the constituents, and I understand what you're saying about possibly taking it out. I recall looking at the newspaper in Cary, and Morrisville are raising their tax on registration of vehicles to 30 cents. We just gone up to 20 cents. So
$30 a
I'm
year.
sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was thinking when I was born.
Turn of the other century.
So there are other ways that we can go to get the additional funds, and we're going to need additional funds because, as we well know, where we sit with transportation and the need to improve the streets, and that comes down to safety too, especially for our kids. I was reading an article that more children get killed going to school than in these horrible shootings and things. So, you know, it's important that we improve the safety of our roads. So I was very affirmative to go ahead and do the tax to get that done.
I agree.
I'll stand on that.
Yeah, I agree with those things, and I think often advocates typically talk about, you know, budgets are a moral document, and so you think about when your budget really talks about what your priorities are. And so a large part of most budgets in doing business is personnel also, and benefits. And so as the town grows, which is a good problem to have, then we have to provide the staff with the resources they need, which is sometimes human resources. And so, large part of the budget is to make sure that we have enough, folks from every level of government to be able to provide the service that people in this town deserve. And so it's good that we have a town that can do that. And I think the tax rate is a good one. If we had other levels of government that would fund things that they should, at state level, there's some things we've had to pay for because sidewalks were necessary for our children. If other levels of government would fund transportation, then we wouldn't have to. But that's what's happened, the county commissioners and us. So I'm going to continue to talk about those things too. So thank you for this. Thank you for the infographics that really, I think, are helpful for people to learn about what the budget really is in an easier way. So thank you.
Yeah, and we just saw a graphic the other day that we're going through a 5.8% growth rate. So we're looking at possibly around 90,000 people in 2013. We have to be proactive, and right now our biggest complaint is the transportation, is our roads. If we're not proactive, we're going to get farther and farther behind. So I think this is a good step.
All right, thanks everyone. At this time I have a motion and a second on the table for approval of the budget and the fee schedule. If there is no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
All right, the budget passes by a margin of 4 to 1. We appreciate all the effort staff have made, and we know that many folks spent many hours, including weekends, and we appreciate the effort. The infographics are awesome, and I hope that you can let people know that they will be somehow available for people to look at for the next 12 months.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, we're working on, actually, Stacy Galway is working on that.
Very
currently.
nice.
Yes.
Very nice. All right, thank you very much. Is there more?
I got number 2.
Oh, you're up next?
Yep.
Okay. All right, that concludes new business number 1. I was going to wait for you to sit down and then call you back. No?
I got my stuff
Okay,
different,
all right. New business number 2, this is our 2018 and 19 CIP, or Capital Improvement Project, and associated project ordinances.
So along with the budget, we do ask for consideration of the capital improvement plan. Keep in mind, the plan itself is 5 years and beyond. Only the first year becomes actual budget. The first year of the plan, so 18-19, is incorporated into the budget you just adopted. So that's really what you're formally adopting. The other 4 years are still a plan. They're fluid. So when you look at it, any of those numbers can change because as much as we try and plan out, we can't predict everything. So please keep that in mind. Just a few quick numbers about the capital improvement plan. You can see there, that gives you an idea of what, we're talking about 5 years, you're looking at almost $200 million worth of projects. Now, a quarter of that, 50 million roughly, is the parks associated with the bonds. But you can see the breakdown per fund, what those projects are. For 18-19, what would be approved is $40 million worth of capital projects that just goes into the budget that you just approved. 20 of that is the bonds that we technically already have, but we're putting into the budget now. So it's really only about 20 new projects that are going in. We're just asking this time just for formal approval of this so that it's in our budget and we can get started on these capital projects.
Great. Questions on the CIP and the ordinances, or is there a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, discussion on the motion?
Good.
All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for your staff. And great job, Mr. Town Manager, presenting this balanced budget. And, well, it's your budget. It's the manager's budget that you presented. So thank you very much.
Truly a team effort.
I know. We'll pass around the credit.
I'll take all the work.
Mr. Brown, how much credit do you want? You're here. Might as well jump in.
Good job, Dennis.
It's a big pie, big enough to share. All right, we conclude now our new business. We now move to the item of closed session. At this time, I'd like to ask that we have a motion to go into closed session to consult with the town attorney and to consult with the town attorney on the matter of H.H. Trinity Apex Investments, LLC, et al. v. Town of Apex. Is there a motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor of going to closed session indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, we're now going into closed session, and let the public be advised that there's nothing else on our agenda for discussion after the closed session item tonight. Thank you very much.